Okay, now that your code is working, we're going to change it here. So in the code, you'll notice that I have a whole lot of repeated things. I have some beginning of the scene events that are happening, and I purposely told you at the beginning that I broke them up this way. But I'm having them all do the same things. I have enemies all being checked for the Y position and doing the same kind of deleting. I have hit points, so when the hit points are less than 0 or less than 0, I'm deleting enemy. So I have a lot of stuff that's happening to these enemies that are all the same. And so I can build some groups and program around groups instead, okay? So by doing a group, I can click on Scene Game, and I can create a group with the group editor. And that's this icon right here with the 3 squares in it. So go ahead and click on that. And I need to create a group. So I'm gonna click on the plus or this area to add a group. And I'm gonna rename this group. And I'm gonna call it Group Enemies. Or Group Enemy, I think is what I'm gonna call it. Oops, gotta get a Y in there. So now I have this group, or click on it. It's gonna tell me that this group is empty, and I'm gonna put all the enemy objects in here. That's the enemy itself, the asteroid, and the missile, okay? And so I can just click and then add at will here, asteroid, and then I gotta put in the enemy missile. So I should have the enemy, asteroid, enemy missile. And what's great about this is maybe you decide to put in a second enemy with a different color, or maybe more hit points, or do something different. You can still put it in this group, and all the same basic stuff will be applied to it. So now I have this group enemy, and I can close this, but I know that I have 3 things in there. So when I go over to the events, now that I have group enemy, if I tell something to happen to the group, it applies all actions to that whole group. For example, this beginning at the scene happens 3 times, and I have 3 different enemies in here, all with the same code that's happening. Well, instead of doing at the beginning of the scene, add a permanent force to enemy, and at the beginning of the scene, add a permanent force to the missile, and at the beginning of the scene, add a permanent force to the asteroid, I can just say, at the beginning of the scene, add a permanent force to everything in the group enemy of 50 pixels per second on the y-axis, okay? So I'm gonna change this first one right here. Instead of being object enemy, I'm gonna change it to group, and I can find that group enemy all the way down to the very bottom. And then I'm gonna delete the other 2 events that I wrote. So now I just have everything in the enemy group getting a force applied to it, okay? Now I can do the exact same thing here. Instead of saying check for the enemy, check for the asteroid, check for the missile, I can just say check the position on any enemy in the group enemies, and if their scene window height is greater than or equal to the height, so once it goes off the screen, delete that enemy. And then I can just say group enemy, so it knows that we just have to look in the group enemy, and it'll know that it's the airplane, right? The spaceship that gets deleted, not the asteroid. Or it gets the first enemy to go off gets deleted, not the third, okay? So I'm gonna change this also to group enemy. And then I'm gonna change delete. I'm gonna do group enemy. And then I'm gonna delete each of the extra scene windows here. So now I've gotten rid of 4 lines of code doing this, right? And I can do it one more time. We got the variable hit points. It's the same variable in all 3 of these events, but and it's looking for 0 hit points or less. And whenever that happens, we're just deleting enemies. So again, I can go through here and change this to group enemy. And I can change this to group enemy. And then I can delete these extra conditions here. So now I have taken 2 more away, so I've deleted 6 lines of code, and now this is a lot easier to see. Great time to save and test my code. So I'm gonna save and play. Interesting. It's all working just as planned, right? Nothing's changed. Enemies are on the screen. They're still randomly firing. They're moving down the screen at the same speed. Life is good. It's a lot easier to do some work. And this is going to help us here in a little bit once we add the missile to the player and the missile starts hitting the ships and the asteroids. We can do damage to a group and not an individual, okay? So, working as planned. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the player. And so I just clicked on this last event because I'm gonna put a new comment in, and I want that comment to end up down here. And so I can, I just click on it so I know that it'll end up in the last part of my code and not above. And so I'm going to add a comment, which is this icon right here. And then slide this thing down. So now I can put in player. So this one's going to be player events. So now I know everything that's under this comment is going to be based on the player. In order to make the video less and have you do more without me showing it to you every single time, I want you to build the necessary events here in the player code. Player ship move around using the keyboard. Keep the player ship from moving off the screen. Fire a missile using the spacebar. Have the player missile move upward on the screen and be destroyed when it goes outside of the screen. And I want you to pick and assign a shooting sound. So every time the player missile shoots, it's going to make a sound. I am not going to go through and show you how to do that. In fact, I'm going to pause my video. I'm going to put in all my code, and this is a chance for you to test and remember how to do these things, and you need to go back and do it.